One phrase you hear pop up in the Stoic writings quite a bit is this idea of living in accordance with nature. All the Stoics talk about it. But one thing they didn't do is define that particularly well. Did they mean human nature? Did they mean outside nature? Did they mean some sort of metaphysical nature? Probably some combination of all of the above. But I want to talk about one of those which is most interesting and I think most accessible to us. The idea of living in and with nature. So that's one thing you see abounding in the Stoic writings. Marcus Aurelius is writing beautifully about the way that stalks of grain bend over low under their own weight. He talks about animals, the way there's flecks of foam on the boar's mouth. Seneca writes a whole series of books on natural questions, on sort of what we would today call biology and anthropology. So the Stoics were definitely fascinated with this, and they weren't your sort of classroom-bound, bookish philosophers. They were people who got outside in the world. And that's what I try to do. I'm Ryan Holiday. I've written a number of books about Stoic philosophy. Of course, this is my life. This is what I get excited about. But I also live on a little ranch outside Austin, Texas, where I try to spend a good chunk of my time. I try to do things outside every day. I try to be out in nature because it makes me happy. And that's what we're going to talk about in today's episode. Some Stoic strategies to live in nature, to appreciate nature, and get happiness and joy from nature. Nothing makes me happier, for instance, than going to see my two donkeys. I have Buddy and Sugar. That's them right there. So Buddy I bought on Craigslist for $100, maybe the single best purchase and investment I've ever made. And then Sugar, we got her for, I think, $300 on Craigslist. And they're just the sweetest. Hey! Oof. Oof. Sugar is much moodier than Buddy. I'd say Buddy's a bit of a sex pest, if I'm being perfectly honest, but he's a nice boy. I think one thing I realized one time, I walked over and I was just sort of watching Buddy. He's just standing there for like hours and hours. I realized he's not comparing himself to anyone, right? He's not wondering if he's adequate or not. He's just alive, right? He's just still, right? That expression, human being, not human doing. Buddy doesn't wrestle with that at all. He's just present. Look at him. When I go out and I see the animals, when I spend time with them, it calms me down, makes me happier, makes me more grateful, makes me more present. And then I can bring that energy back towards my regular life, toward my job, towards the world that is not calm and chill like they are. And there's something about animal energy. This is why they do equine therapy, for instance. Just being around the animals, feeling them, having to adjust your mood, having to read their mood. There's something very special and powerful about that. And so, yeah, he was $100, and he's kind of a lot of work sometimes. Not really, he's pretty low maintenance, but he pays us back in many, many ways. Mostly just being alive and being a good example. And one time you fought off a mountain lion, didn't you, Buddy? Remember? You still have some scars. Buddy, where's your scar? Somewhere around here. His neck was all bit up. That's what they do. They're livestock guarding animals. Their job is just to sort of be around. They keep the cows company, and they keep bad stuff away. That's what Buddy does. And then Sugar gets us a baby every once in a while. Buddy and Sugar have a baby every year or so, about 13 months, and we name it Booger. And then we spread the love and we share it with friends. Let's see if Sugar will let me pet her today. She's kind of grouchy. Sugar, you got something on you. Sugar's a little smaller than Buddy. And then we've got this little lake here, which sometimes we go fishing in. Hunting and fishing, as far as hobbies go, teach us all sorts of amazing philosophical lessons. Patience, of course. Ingenuity, of course. Silence, of course. And then, some certain resiliency, a certain gratitude for the gifts of nature. And then, you got to learn these skills, right? Fishing is a skill. Hunting is a skill. Cleaning a fish or a deer or a hog it's gross, but it's a skill. And then from that skill, you get certain benefits, right? And that's what life is. I think one of the things I've had to learn when I go hunting, especially, I talked to Peter Attia about this on the podcast. I'll show you a chunk of that.
One of the experiences I find when I'm hunting is so first off, you have this sort of awareness. And then when you see the thing that you are looking for, you get that rush, that flood of emotion, the recognition, the practice of having to calm down the adrenaline dump because you know it's not going to be productive. To me, I get the most out of hunting just in the unusual practice or the building of that muscle, which I feel like you don't get to so consciously do in the rest of your life.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing experience that you're right. There's no comparison to that in regular life. All of the best laid plans can go right out the window in the fog of war. Mm-hmm. And in archery especially, this is a much bigger issue. So I only hunt with a bow and arrow. In archery, the goal is obviously for the most rapid and humane expiration of the animal. So therefore you want to be as close as possible so that the risk of a subpar shot is gone. Well, anybody who's hunted elk knows that when you're 50 yards or less from an elk during the rut, I mean, you can smell it, you can feel its spit hitting you at times. By the way, if it gets really angry, it'll charge you and it will destroy you. It could impale you. You now have to be able to calm yourself down to do something that is very technically hard, which is shoot a bow and arrow. I work with this guy named Joel Turner, who's, I think, one of the masters of teaching the process of the perfect shot. And you've probably heard of target panic, right? Target panic is a real issue in anything, but boy, especially in archery. How do you get out of target panic? Well, it turns out you have to shift your focus from the aim to the process of the shot. And you have to turn it into something called a closed loop process as opposed to an open loop. So an open loop process is something that you do without thinking that can't be stopped mid-process. Whereas something that is closed loop, everything you're doing is being done slowly enough that you can stop at any moment, and your only capacity is to focus on that thing. You can't be thinking about anything else. Now, that's not an easy thing to do. That in and of itself is a remarkable skill. But once you have that skill, all of a sudden, even when an elk is screaming and, it's just total chaos in the midst of wherever you are, you can sort of focus on the process and not the aiming, which is the thing that you would by the process, I mean the shot process.
Having to calm yourself down, having to understand that your racing heart rate here is not your friend, that your emotions here are not necessarily your friend, and to calm yourself down and to be in command of oneself to do this thing that you have to do. Obviously, people who fight in wars or respond to real crises are experience this in a real way, but hobbies that challenge us in that way, right, are really good. Plus, they get us outside. There's this great passage from Theodore Roosevelt where he goes out, he spends all days in the rain, whatever. He ends up getting what he wanted, which he says is a reward. He says, but if one actually needed a reward, because the reward was doing all the stuff, right? I think that's one of the things you learn when you go hunting is you have to detach from the results a little bit. You have to actually experience the process. Hey, buddy. You have to experience the process. You have to be present for it. You just have to understand that, you can do everything you want to do right, but then you also just have to turn yourself over to the gods, so to speak, right? How's the weather that day? What are the animals doing that day, right? There's a certain acceptance, the art of acquiescence, as Epictetus calls it. So you practice that too. So I think hobbies that get you out and challenge you, there's a reason Marcus Aurelius goes hunting. There's a reason hunting metaphors abound in the ancient world, because they obviously had a different food system than us. They didn't have the luxury of just magically getting everything from the supermarket. They had to learn how to do things. They had to understand where their food came from, and so do we. Getting out into nature is one of the most wonderful things there is. That's my donkey. He's yelling right there. When I'm out on my farm, when I'm walking, that's where I get most of my ideas. That's where I get a good chunk of my happiness. Lately, when I've been walking around on the farm, when I've been doing chores down at the farm, I've been wearing these new Tecovas boots that the folks at Tecovas were nice enough to send over. Tecovas is an awesome boot brand. Their Western boots for men and women are handmade from the most premium leathers. The boots are Austin designed, Texas tested, and handmade in the boot making capital of the world, Leon, Mexico. They're your traditional Western boot, but Tecovas has innovated on comfort, style, and service. And Tecovas is Western to their core. Tecovas believes in Western for all. Just head on into one of their stores. You'll be greeted like family, offered a boot shine and a drink, and get custom fitted for a new pair of boots. And if you can't make it into a store, Tecovas delivers the most premium quality and the most comfortable Western wear right to your door. Visit tecovas.com. That's TECOVAS.com. And point your toes west. Musonius Rufus has a whole essay on how farming is the profession best suited to philosophy. I don't know exactly what he means. I think he's saying that, cultivation, right? I think he's saying that patience. I think he's talking about hard work and dedication. I think he's talking about being outside. It's a profession unlike, something more exploitative, something more manipulative, right? It's something that forces one to play by certain rules. Isn't quite as virtuous a profession. I don't exactly farm stuff, but I would say that, getting this place, what it's forced us to do is learn a bunch of skills we wouldn't have otherwise learned, to understand the world in ways that we probably otherwise wouldn't have had to do. There's so many moments when we wanted to give up, when we wanted to go back towards an easier life, when we wanted to live like everyone else. It makes you responsible, right? We're responsible for these guys. We're responsible for the chickens. We're responsible for keeping everyone safe, for taking care of them, for making sure that they're fed. These are all, I think, great traits that challenge you, that force you to grow up, force you to be responsible, but you get a lot out of it in exchange, which of course is the essence of what the Stoics are talking about. And maybe that's what Musonius Rufus meant when he said that farming is the only profession that a philosopher should embark on. One of the things about being outside, being in nature, especially being out in the country, is it's quieter and it forces you to be present, to observe. It calms you down. Like I'm just noticing the different prints that I'm seeing here. I saw some raccoon prints a few minutes ago. You got to be on the lookout for snakes. The donkeys were walking behind me earlier. I don't want them to sneak up on me. You're just always noticing, right? I think that's a beautiful part of meditations. You see that Marcus Aurelius had cultivated kind of the poet or the artist's eye. He's noticing these little things. He says, the flecks of foam on the boar's mouth. He says, the furrowed brow of the lion. He's cultivated a kind of presence. Winston Churchill, who falls in love with painting at middle age, right? One of the things it does is it gets him outside into nature in a way that, as a very ambitious, busy sort of worldly guy, he wasn't doing, right? You look at Winston Churchill and you go, yeah, this isn't a guy who's going for long runs or bike rides, but getting out in a field and painting, watching a sunset, observing a flower, it forces him to slow down, to notice and be present. Like right now where I am, it's not the most beautiful, right? All the leaves have fallen. We're still dealing with a bit of a drought in Texas, although we finally got some serious rain last week. The more I live here, the more I spend time, I find beauty in all the different seasons if I look for it, right? If I try to be observant and notice and find, oh, that's cool, I didn't see that before. I've lived here now for going on 10 years and, even though I've walked every inch of this, I find things that I missed the whole time, or I find something that washed up, or I find something new that's happened, right? And that's one of the things you're doing. You're walking around, you're checking the fences, you're just monitoring what's going on, you're present. It's not work, but being responsible for all this, you have to be aware. As you cultivate land, a piece of property, or a place on earth, it's also cultivating in you a kind of presence and awareness. And I found that to be immensely beneficial. If you want some semblance of the cycle of life and death on the farm, these are some bones of a cow I had to put down. I think this is a deer or a boar or something. But look, just walking, as I'm walking back to the fence, I'll show you. This is, I think a leg bone from one of the cows, and then the dogs were grabbing it and playing with it. That's just how it goes. So anyways, there's a certain stillness to being around it, but there's also this kind of sobering reminder of memento mori. Same thing will happen to us eventually, right? You know, we're not that different than even than a cow. Hopefully nobody will eat us, but what do we care? We'll be dead. Let me show you the goats too. That's Turtle. That's Bucket. That's Watermelon. Turtle is from Brent from Cerro Gordo. He had her here in Austin. He was actually kidnapped and then he came back, and then Brent couldn't drive her all the way out to California, so he lives with us now. This is Watermelon. We rescued him. Bucket is our first goat. We had another goat that we really loved named Biscuit, and we'd been here maybe 2 years. Biscuit got out, went over to our neighbors, escaped, and got impregnated, came back, had babies, you know, a while later, and we called the neighbor, and he had more experience with goats. He said, could you help us? Unfortunately, she died in childbirth. They were huge calves, so I think one of them was stillborn, this whole thing. And, you know, we were really sad to go to the point about there being life and death. We were really sad about it. And then as our neighbor was helping us clean up, you know, he was consoling us. And then he said, hey, can I have the babies and the goat that it all died? And we said, why? And he's like, I'm gonna barbecue them and feed them to my dog. And you're just like, whoa, this is a different life, man. But it's that point of like, you know, you think you're special, but you know, someone will eat you when you die if you're not careful. I think the idea is that you can see Stoicism anywhere and everywhere, and that's in fact in life that we should look for these lessons. That's what I do. That's why I love living out here. You can see the philosophical lessons not just in the pages of Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, but in a cow, in a goat, in a painful experience, in a goose going missing. And these are the ways that the words sort of, you read about them and then you have to experience them in some way. Living out here in the country has been a constant reminder of that. Some very happy, fun days, like today when we get a new calf. Some sad days when we have to bury something or put something down or lose it or sell it. But such is life, such is Stoicism. I'll see you soon. When I wrote The Daily Stoic 8 years ago, I had this crazy idea that I would just keep it going. The book was 366 meditations, but I'd write one more every single day and I'd give it away for free as an email. I thought maybe a few people would sign up. Couldn't have even comprehended a future in which 750,000 people would get this email every single day, and would for almost a decade. If you want to get the email, if you want to be part of a community that is the largest group of Stoics ever assembled in human history, I'd love for you to join us. You can sign up and get the email totally for free, no spam. You can unsubscribe whenever you want at dailystoic.com/email.